Okay, so moving forward, if we're already noticing here, I have two keyframes on the intro page, and I've got one where it's at the very end on frame 100. And if I click on this keyframe, notice everything disappears. That's because we built everything at this first keyframe, and up until frame 99, it understands that all that remains there up till 99. And then at frame 100, since we keyframed it prior with nothing on the stage, it understands that all that is no longer to be shown. How do we fix this issue? And you're going to run this method as you progress throughout the storybook build out. You're going to just basically click on the frame that's before the one that you keyframed, and then select that one only, and then right click and go to insert keyframe. And then with that frame selected, or that keyframe selected, just click and drag and drop it over the one at the end, and it overrides it. So now everything is fixed. All this information is displayed up till frame 100. All right, perfect. So if you ever have to make any corrections like that, now you know the process. All right. So looking at our button, we've got a go to next page button. Well, this is our intro screen, and I've built this button for use throughout the whole project, but we need it to actually say start. So I'm going to basically create a new button using this as its default template setup, and then we can use the buttons at any time throughout the project. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually to fix this and do it correctly, I'm going to actually select this button that I've created now. I'm going to go to up top, I'm going to go edit, copy, and then I'm going to edit, I'm going to go to paste in center. You probably don't want to paste in place, you can, but just overlays it, but I'm just going to paste in center. So we create a copy, and I'm going to click and drag and move it down here, and notice that we have two copies now. What I would need to do at this time is with this selected, I'm going to go up top and go modify, break apart, and that's going to get this back to square one. This is no longer a symbol, so this allows us to edit it, and then we'll have to reconvert it back into another symbol. So I'm going to basically select my text, I'm going to double click it, get in there, click, drag, select it, and change this to start. Have that done, and then hit the selectional tool, and voila, back to square one. And then I'm going to select all those elements of the arrow, and it looks like I selected my stage. So be careful if you're building things all together in one layer, and you click and drag, you select anything within that selectional icon box that you create. So I'm going to select just the parts of my arrow, and then I'm going to hold shift and left click the stage, which is the actual background, to deselect it. So then that remains, so then only these objects remain selected. So you might have to keep that in mind moving forward. Be sure you remember that. And then with just those elements selected, I'm going to go to modify, convert to symbol. And I'm going to name this button start. And it's going to be a button, and registration point is 0. Click OK. And now within the library, you're noticing that we have a start button. So what's really cool is this is my start button now. This is my go-to page. We cannot just take this one button, edit, copy, paste it, and change it, and I'll show you why. I'm going to now delete my start button. And even though it's deleted, it's still in your library. It can come over anytime you want. Okay? So I'm going to delete it. What you cannot do is, I'll show you real quick. So if I select this button, the go to next page button, and I go edit, copy, then edit, paste in center, paste the button. And let's say I just want to change the text for this one. Double click it, get inside there, then change the text. Look what happens. Change it to start, click the selection arrow, and notice it changes the copy. So this plays a disadvantage. That's why you have to go through the break apart process to create the start button. Okay? All right. So let's say the go to next page, I want it in this position, but I need it to be the actual start button. So for the start button, I'm going to actually have this button selected, and we need it to be called the start button. Go up to properties, and you notice that there's a swap feature. Okay, so I can have the button selected and go to swap. A little swap symbol menu comes up. I can grab start, which is the start button, click OK, and perfect. It's ready to go. So that plays a really good advantage for you. So we got a start. We've got our intro screen. Everything's set up accordingly, and we are ready to move forward. So if I go to, again, if I scroll to the very end here and I see frame 100, that keyframe, it looks like it goes back to the go to next page. That's because everything we built at this keyframe is basically displayed like it is up till frame 99. So to fix this issue again, I'm going to select frame 99 only, right click, insert keyframe, and then I'll click and drag and drop that keyframe over the very last one, and now we're back, and it does a little override, and now everything looks good. It's exactly what we want for opening screen, and it's set up accordingly. In our library, we got both our buttons that we can use for all your code, and I'm ready to progress. Okay, so like the other button that we created, I need to go back into the start button, so I'm going to double click it and get inside the button parameters, and I have to actually rebuild the timeline here. So I'm going to select over, right click, insert keyframe, select down, right click on it, insert keyframe, select the hit section, right click, insert keyframe, get all my keyframes created, and then I'm going to go through that same process. I'm going to make sure all the colors change to the colors that we selected for the go to next page. So on the over, we had the text turn into that blue. Let's go to Properties tab, we'll switch it to that blue. And then on the down, I had the text turn into the red, I believe. And again, I can right click on that text, go to Range, lock it, so I can just select the other parts of the button. So select that part, change its color to the green. Select that part, change its color to the green. And on the hit, we can just create a random rectangle here. Encompasses all the button. Looks good. All that is set up. There it is. And now when I go back to scene 1, I'll put it in the left corner, get back to where we are. I'm going to control test this. And we can see that we are good to go. All right. Perfect. So far I've learned how to build buttons, how to modify them. If I go to library, and let's say I wanted to take a look at the other button, the go to next button, if I click and drag and drop it on my stage, notice that it says the other text, and this button can be used for the remaining amount of pages. So I'm going to select it, just delete it. So we have everything set up accordingly for our opening part of our scene. On frame 1, I just modified that button, but everything will be fully updated because it's the button itself when we get to frame 100. Okay, so nothing to worry about. Okay, so let's create the next layer. So I'm going to go down, New Layer, and bottom left corner of the interface, and left click. I'm going to say Layer 1. Layer 1 will actually, I'm going to double click, and we will rename it to Scene 1, because that would be actually our first scene of our storybook animation here. And I'm going to get that in. You can just hit enter, locks it in, and now we got a whole other layer to work with here. So on Scene 1, what I can do here is I can actually, what I want to do is I want to left click and drag and build out the layer to go past 100, because if you remember the code, looking at the code here, the first frame, which is our intro screen, is going to play at 100. Scene 1 is actually going to play, Scene 2 will play at 200, but Scene 1 is going to play on frame 100. So let's look at that. So right now we created the layer and it ends at frame 100. I've got to click and drag and extend. I'm going to go across my timeline all the way to frame 200. Now when I click and drag, it allows me to scroll across the timeline, which is good. So I'm going to, again, click and drag from frame, ahead of frame 100, which is frame 101, all the way across. I'm going to go to 200 and release my click at 200. Select those frames. I'm going to right click and go to Insert Frame. And now once that's done, it extends it out. Now nothing has been built yet on this layer. That's why the layer looks hollow across your timeline, and that's okay. So at frame 100, what I'm going to do now is this is actually where the scene would start. This actually represents cut frames when you see the timeline and the layer appears like that. So I'm going to select frame 100. I'm going to right click and go to Insert Keyframe. And on frame 100, now that we have a keyframe, it looks hollow because, again, nothing's been built at frame 100, but I've inserted that keyframe. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to use my controls here to kind of pan around. I'm going to create a whole new rectangle, let's say, across my stage here. And let's say this is a change of scene. So it's not my opening scene. Let's say I had a background that had like maybe some trees and foliage or a mountain range. So I'm going to create my new rectangle. Let's say I got a nice big green rectangle. You know what? I probably need to do sky, so let me switch my green back to like a light shade of blue. That looks pretty good. More like a teal, let's see. There we go. All right, perfect. Again, you can change your colors anytime using properties. I'm going to do like a little sky blue here. And at any time, if you want to switch the color, even do like a gradient. You can switch it to a gradient if you want to do like a linear gradient. And then you can even, if you are using a gradient, you can go to Window, Color, remember? And inside the Color menu, you can indicate which colors you want on this gradient. Double click one swatch, change the color, double click the other. Make sure your object is selected so you can make those color updates. Looks like I'm got my linear gradient going this direction. Let's say I want a lighter blue. There we go. I can switch it to radial in here or solid color using those properties. But let's say I wanted the darker blue to be up top. It was like my sky kind of gets closer to space. So I could grab the transform tool, just rotate this rectangle. Hold shift and you can snap it that direction. Perfect. And I can use the control handles to just kind of modify it. Using that transform tool. Perfect. All right. Hit the selection tool, lock that in. And notice at frame 100 so far, all the way up to 200, that shape is built. That's exactly what we want. This would be our background layer. So I'm going to go ahead and go to frame 200. And I'm going to keyframe it. So I'm going to say frame 200. I'm going to right click, insert keyframe. At frame 200. Perfect. All right, so at frame 101, the animation will actually start here on this frame, and then all the way to 200, it's going to end. So, perfect. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so that is our scene one. Let's see, I can build some other stuff across this stage if I want that kind of represents other scene elements. Let's say I want to do like a ground here. Let's grab tan brown rectangle. All right, perfect. Looks like I created this rectangle with a stroke, so I can go in there at any time. Remember, double click it, get inside the submenu, and just double click the stroke and hit delete, knock it out. Scene one, perfect. All right, this rectangle looks like it's got a stroke too. I'll double click it, get back in there, double click the stroke, and then hit delete on my keyboard. I can get rid of it. If you have strokes you don't really need, or if you wanted objects with strokes, you're welcome to. Okay. And on scene one, let's say I had this little area, and I'm building like a train that could, I could build other scenic elements. Now, if I wanted to build like trees, mountain range, and so forth, and use all the tools that's provided in Flash, based on what we learned prior in the previous instructional videos about using all these tools. So if you have not watched the video, you need to go back, and definitely I have a little intro to Flash video where I run through all these tools, how to use the pen tool, and so forth. I'm just doing something very basic animation playbook here. All right, so anything that's going to be animated, this is scene one, but now we actually have to have another layer that actually has the animated elements on it. You cannot put animated elements on your background, which is your scene one. This is basically the layer that's going to have your button controls and other scenic elements, where anything that's like animated content, either using Motion Tween or Classic Tween, has to go on a whole other layer. So what I'll do is I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to name this Scene 1 Animation. And I could probably call it Animation 1. If you want to have multiple things all in Scene 1 rather than just one character, you'd have to create a whole other layer with another animated element. So I'm going to say Scene 1 Animation 1. And I will then left click on frame 100, right click, go to insert keyframe. And then on that keyframe, notice it's a hollow keyframe, I can now create my other scenic elements. So once you create it, it already goes to 200 for you. Remember, if you need to remove frames at any time, you can just simply left click, drag, select what you don't want, right click, and go remove frames. But because we're following this process, it's creating frames up till the very last ending point. So kind of keep that in mind. All right. On this frame, since this is my hollow keyframe, I will now create my scenic elements or my characters. So let's say I had a foreground character. Let's grab like an oval tool, and let's say I want a certain color. Now it looks good. This will be my character. Looks like I created them with a gray stroke. Let's say I want a black stroke. A little bit more of a stroke here. So a stroke of a 5. That's good. And then the body, let's say for the body, I had like my blue kind of going back to the beginning of the video. And this character, you use the transform tool to modify this further. Let's say this is just the body of my character, whatever I'm doing. I can be more creative with this later, or just for this project, but this is just, again, example project. I'm showing you how to use the code to build this out. Let's say this is my foreground elements character. He runs outside frame like we studied before. And I need to see those title action safe again, so I'm going to turn, I'm going to unlock this layer so I can select it, and then I'm just going to basically left click and drag, and I'm basically just going to select that endpoint of the title action safe, and then I can just select it, and then I can hover over, click and drag it, and go all the way to frame 200, and it extends that out. So now I can see those title actions safe throughout the whole process, or across the whole timeline up to 200 now. That made it real easy. Lock that back into place, and now I can get an idea what's going on with my title action. Looks like when I get to frame 200, my scene 1 elements disappear. That's because I built it up until that point. So again, I'd select frame, in this case, 199, right click, insert keyframe, and then left click and drag and drop that over the very end, and now everything's up to par. Perfect. So I can get an idea of using this title action safe, how my character fits into frame. It's exactly what we want. And let's say now we want this character to be animated up until 200. So I can just go ahead and lock all my other layers. I can just left click those dots and lock them down. And then on scene 1, animation 1, which is my character, I'm going to select those 2 shapes I built for my character. Select the first one, hold shift, select the other. Got to modify, convert the symbol, and I can create this into a movie clip. And I'll name this person 1. Why not? And because it is a symbol, click OK. And if you go into the library panel, you're noticing that my person is now a movie clip and it's showing up. Bring him over to stage anytime. If this isn't where I want him on stage, delete him. Back in my library, I can bring him over anytime and use him again. So let's say my character enters into frame. So back on frame 101 here, or frame 101 is where it starts. I'm going to have my character outside of frame, and let's say he animates and moves into scene. So at frame 100, I'll select that keyframe, make sure I have him where I want him to be, and then at frame 200, I will select it. I can have him animate all the way to 200, or I can have him come in shorter. So let's say at like frame 130. Let's say he comes in. I'll select 130, right click, insert keyframe, and I'll use the transform tool, click drag, hold shift, so I move in parallel, like what we learned prior. Again, if you have not watched my previous videos, you need to be sure you do that, because I have a ball bounce animation that I show how to use all these controls. And then at frame 130, he slides into place. Everything looks good. And then what I can do is use the selection tool. I'll just click and drag across this timeline. We'll do a classic tween here. Select those frames, right click, say create classic tween, and now he walks in the scene, and then he can animate further. Anything else you want with him, using all the animation that we learned prior. So that's the setup process for any kind of element. So if I had another character that I want to animate in scene 1 before it carries out the story, I would have to create a whole nother layer. So I'm going to do that. Let's say this is scene 1, animation 2. And then on this layer, I would repeat this process. I'm going to keyframe, select frame 101, right click, insert keyframe. And then on this one, I would do the same thing. Let's say I have another character. Okay, looks like I got my character created here. I'm going to select both of the elements. Going to select the first one, hold shift, select the other object that I created. We built both of them on that layer. That's perfect because that represents that character, let's say. And then I'll go ahead and go to modify, convert to symbol, and this one will have to be a movie clip too. So I got a movie clip. Let's call this person 2, I guess. It could be whatever you want. Character 2, however, registration point at 0. Okay. That character now is in the library as a symbol. Again, I can select it, delete it, bring it over anytime I want on the stage, onto that layer, and it's ready to go. Let's say I want this character to actually be in frame, and let's say instead of like a foreground character, he's kind of in the background. So I can bring him over, and then I can use the transform tool, hold shift, click and drag the corner. I can scale him down if I want to make him kind of like a distance object, maybe back there. Maybe he's waiting on this train to come in, you know. And then basically at this point in time, I could have him there. He could be doing something else. Or I can have him walk into frame as well. But anyway, he would have to be on a whole other separate layer. So if my playhead's moving in, this would be scene 1 up to frame 200. I got one character comes into place. This character's back there. Maybe he's just a static character to kind of fill in that gap. Maybe that area to establish more balance in your scene. Anything that's typography, what I suggest doing, like let's say you had a typographic message that needed to pop up to kind of talk about what's going on here. I create another layer, and I'll call this scene 1. Type 1, maybe. That sounds good. Again, I would want to select the frame where that's going to start. Again, we're at frame 101, so I'll select that frame, right-click, insert keyframe. Now let's create a, use the text box, and let's say waiting for the train. There we go. We'll say waiting for the train. Let's say I want to change the color. Let's go to properties, say white. Use the control handles and modify. Maybe I want the size to be bigger than what it is. Okay. Waiting for the train. Perfect. Now, if this was an animated element that you wanted to have come in reference to that example I showed you at the beginning, let's say it's up here. You could say waiting for the train. Maybe it's just placed there as it references even what you may draw for your storyboard or your script. And let's say you want this animated to make it a little more fun and entertaining. It doesn't have to just be at frame 101 as a static text that's talking about what's going on. You can actually have this selected, go to modify, convert to symbol. Let's have it be a movie clip. Let's call this type 1. Or scene 1, type 1. It's going to be a movie clip. Registration point 0. Okay. In the library tab, notice that it's there. Perfect. Again, I can delete it, and it can be click, drag, and drop it on the stage at any time. On that layer, make sure you have the layer selected that you're bringing things over onto, okay? Otherwise, you can drop. If I had this layer selected, I could accidentally drop and move that onto that layer, and that's not what we want. So, all right. So, scene 1, type 1, it's on that layer. And then I can have it, let's say, have it outside frame. Let's have it animate into scene at frame 101. And then at, let's say, frame, I don't know, let's have it slide in at like frame 115. Instead of classic tween, remember I taught earlier motion tween. You can use motion tween if you'd like. You can just, basically if you already have anything created and you already have it stationed where you want it, and it's outside of frame so we're not going to see it, I can right click, and motion tween works a little bit differently. Create motion tween. It turns into a totally different color. It's like a lighter blue shade, and I can just move the playhead to where I want it to actually place in. You don't have to keyframe. You can just grab the transform tool, click and drag, hold shift to move it parallel, move it into your frame, and as soon as you move it at that frame, it automatically creates like an auto key process. So you can do motion tween or classic tween, whatever works best for you. So I got waiting for the train. If you noticed earlier in the Storybook Animation example that I showed at the beginning of the video, there's the character, the polar bear character, and he comes in, the penguin was moving across through tweening, and this character actually does like a wave motion, in addition to these kind of things popping up. This is actually what we call frame-by-frame animation. Even type can roll in at certain areas. In order to create that in Flash, what you would do is, let's have another character basically kind of looking around out here in the distance area. So I'm going to create another layer, and let's call this one Scene 1 Animation 3. I will left click where this all starts between 101 and 200 at frame 101, right click, insert keyframe, and then on that keyframe I'm going to build my other supporting character or element. Let's say I have a character and we want to look like he's jumping up and down or something. Let's say head, rectangle, let's get a different color. Okay. Again, this is not being creative. These are just simple objects I'm using as characters just to show how to process in this. You want to be more creative than what I'm doing here, of course, you know, as it aligns with the storybook example I've shown you that my student did. So let's say I wanted a character to make it look like he's looking both directions. So I'm just going to use some going back to the first intro video, the flash video I created. I showed you how to kind of create eyes and look around. So let's say I want to put some eyes on this guy before I convert into a symbol. Let's go oval. Let's do an oval. Let's just hold shift, create one eye here. It looks like my stroke is that light gray, so I'll select that object, change the stroke. Looks like I got an alpha. Let's go back to 100. Say stroke is black. That looks good. I'll create one, and then I'll go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place, and then click and drag and move its copy over. Real simple. This goes back to that first video I showed you, the intro to Flash video. So if you have not seen any of those videos up to this point, then you need to definitely go back and watch those. Oval, make it black, click, drag, hold shift, we'll make some eyes here. Create one, select that one, go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place, then click and drag, hold shift, moves parallel. Nice. So we'll have eyes looking this way, and then I'll flip-flop them and make them look the other direction, okay? Hold shift and select everything that I want as this character. Go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. Let's call this Scene 1, Person 3, for example. Movie clip, and registration point 0, click OK. And this character is now looking that direction. And let's say we want him to look this direction but then look back that direction. Well, it's just basically frame by frame animation. In order to do that, you can just basically say at frame 105, I'll select it, right click, insert keyframe, and I'll have him selected. I can go to Modify, Transform, and I can flip him horizontal, make him look that way. And if I move my playhead back, notice he's just changing, okay? And then I can have him at, let's say, frame 120. I'll left click frame 120, right click, insert keyframe, and then that keyframe will go back to Modify, Transform, have him look back the other way. All right, that's frame by frame animation. So in reference to what my student did is at that point in time in this scene, she basically just created 2 frames or several frames where it just modified this character slightly. So arms up, arms down, mouth open, mouth closed. And then she just put those keyframes in order to create that frame by frame animation similar to what I did here. What I did here though is I basically just made him flip 2 directions. So let's say you wanted the character's arms to be up maybe and then down. Let's do it to this character right here, for example. So let's say scene 1 animation, he's just a supporting character. Let's have his arm down and then his arm can come up. Let's go in here and we build, take this character as his foundational template. Use the rectangle tool. Let's grab the eyedropper tool so I can pull that color. Perfect. Rectangle tool. Eyedropper tool is right here. Select it. Pull from any color. Pull from that one. Grab the rectangle tool. Let's create like an arm, let's say. Okay. Perfect. It's a little arm object here on that layer because that's, make sure you're building your objects on the layer that you want to build in association with what you've already created. So make sure you're selecting your layers first. It's on this layer. And then I'll just go ahead and use the transform tool just to kind of rotate his arm down, let's say. Like that. And what I can do now is I can just select the arm, go edit, copy, edit, paste it center, just so I have another version of it. Then select that one, hold shift, and select all of them and go modify, convert to symbol again. And I can create create this as another symbol and just name it, let's say, person 2, animation 1. It can be a movie clip, registration 0. It all comes together as a movie clip, animated movie clip. And then back in the library, if you're noticing, we have still the person 2 in addition to person 2 animation 1 that I just created as a new symbol. I can go back to person 2, bring this one back over. Let's see, I can fix the size and scale. Perfect. Grab this arm, rotate it up. Looks like it's going behind it, so I can right click on it, go to arrange, and bring it to front. Hold shift, modify, convert to symbol. Okay, and then this would be called scene 1. Person 2, we call person 2. Perfect. So we got scene 1, animation 1, and person 2. I could even go in and rename it right here in the library. Let's say I want it to match up. This would be, sorry, person 2, animation 2. That's what I meant to say. There we go. You can see how we can easily make a transition. So that I can take person 2, which is actually representing the same character, and on this layer here, remember that's where he is. I'm going to delete this one because he's already in the library right over here. And then at frame 110, I will select frame 110, right click, insert keyframe, and I will bring in person 2, animation 2, override them. He should go right into place. Use the arrow keys, position right exactly where you want them. You can delete it, the one that's behind him. So basically just selected that symbol that's behind him, hit delete. So at that keyframe, now his arm lifts, just like so. And that's using already elements that we have established. So if you want to get more in depth, I mean, it's just frame by frame animation. Let me go File, New, and I'm just going to do just something really general, really easy, just to kind of show you. If you have character animation like so, let's say I'm going to create a timeline here. Let's build this character. If you have a character that has facial features to it, and you want to animate those features, just like this scene here that I showed you, when the bear comes in, you notice that you know, not only the arms are moving like I just showed you, but also the mouth. You're going to actually want to make sure the mouth and whatever elements are going to be animated are separate from that character. So if to do that, what you would do is actually, let's just go ahead and create a similar character really quick. Just say this is my two shapes here. And I will go ahead and let's say this is the body of my character. So what I'll do is just select that, convert the symbol. I can name this character body. Have it be a movie clip, registration point 0. Perfect. And then on top of that, there would be a whole nother layer. So I would name this as face controls. Say this is character body. And then on here, I would actually create those items. Say I had 12 of them. Edit, copy, edit, paste in place, click, drag, hold shift. There's my eyes, looks like a snowman. And then I would do an oval. Let's say his mouth is open. Okay, at the facial controls. And so I would go ahead and just select all of these. Select the first one, hold shift, select that one, hold shift, select the mouth, go edit, copy, edit, just paste it center and build out some other variations. And on this one, I could take the transform tool. Let's say I just want to zoom in here and take a look at it. I could skew these down. Hold shift, select both of them so you can do it at the same time. Let's say I want to skew the mouth down. Perfect. And then I would actually, I'm going to select this character body. Let's just lock its layer in the facial controls. I will select these and say modify, convert to symbol. You can have it be a movie clip or you just have it be a graphic because they're static images. And I can just name this face open. Comes in as a static image, and then name these, convert to symbol, face closed. Be a graphic or a movie clip. And then I can delete the facial controls, the face closed, just hit delete on your keyboard. And then again, same applies. So let's say a frame 5. Select frame 5, right click, insert keyframe. And I can actually select this at frame 5, go to properties, and like we learned the button, hit swap. And I can say face closed. Okay, now there you go. And if you want to open it back up, frame 10, right click, insert keyframe, select that, go to properties, hit the swap feature, and go back to face open. So now you have your animated facial controls using frame by frame animation, the method of frame by frame animation on the facial controls layer. The same applies back in your project. So if I wanted to do the same concept, I would have an animated facial controls in above the body layer. So there's either way works, and these are all multiple animation tricks that I'm showing you that you can take advantage of. So okay.